Hi, I'm Phil. I'm a psychotherapeutic counsellor and a trauma therapist. And today I'm going to speak a little bit about how object constancy issues can be at the root of relationship problems. So, object constancy is something that we develop as a result of being brought up in a consistent, safe, and nurturing environment. So, if we get plenty of that, we're going to, over time, develop a sense of value and feel like we're important to our parents because they're consistent and they keep coming back. So, because they do this, eventually we start to trust more that when they do leave the room, that they are going to come back because we have value to them. So, this would be, I mean, This would be a classic description of what would develop object constancy, and that would form the foundations of a secure attachment style. And in later life, people with secure attachments are obviously, because of that early environment, going to be drawn towards something similar. So it's likely that they're going to work towards attaching with other people with secure attachment because being around insecurity or unstable relationships probably isn't going to feel comfortable to them. So, as a child, if your parents' actions don't reassure you that you have value or that you're loved, then it's likely that you're not going to develop a sense of trust that they're there for you, that they've got your back. So instead of object constancy, you're more likely to develop some kind of insecure or avoidant attachment style or personality style, which will probably determine how you perform in relationships in later life. So, and like the person with the secure attachment is drawn to other secure people, those with poor object constancy will often be drawn to people with similar wounds. So, in relation to object constancy, opposites don't always attract. Sometimes we go towards what's the same. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. So, while any environment that's hostile, abusive, or cold can create object constancy issues for children, there are other less sinister situations that can have similar effects. So, that could mean that if you were born into a big family where your parents were just too busy to adequately meet the needs of everybody there, for children who had your parents with some sort of serious illness or disability, if your parents had to prioritize work over parenting due to poverty, or or they may have been in the armed forces, which meant that one or both of them were away quite a lot of the time, or you were consistently moving houses. So in effect, any environment that had a lot of breaks in consistency has the capacity to end up with these sorts of insecurity issues. So, how does poor object constancy impact relationships? Well, there's lots of ways. So, I'm going to describe just a few. So if you think about people who need a lot of control over their partner in relationships, this has got to be about poor object constancy because control is the only dam that's holding all their childhood insecurities at bay. It's the only thing that's inviting them to feel secure. So losing control for that person is a very, very bad thing for them because it means they have to feel feelings that they don't want to feel, that their brains sort of put away somewhere else. So, and if those feelings do start to rise in out of their unconscious into their conscious body, they're likely, instead of feeling those feelings, they're likely to convert them to anger. Because if they can do that, for one thing, they don't have to feel the terrible abandonment fear from history or the neglect or that shame that they weren't wanted, but they can actually feel something that they have more control over. So if they get angry at their partner, then they don't have to miss their partner. It's easier for them to detach, but also their anger might help to bring their partner back under control. So jealousy, of course, will also be a big factor for people with object constancy issues, quite for obvious reasons. They weren't made secure. So jealousy might also be more present for those who were brought up in environments where others were favoritized or prioritized over them. So this doesn't just have to relate to siblings in relation to the sort of golden child scenario, because adults with object constancy issues also could 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 easily become jealous of their children getting attention from their partner, which means if that happens, if one of the parents kicks off because they need some sort of stroke from their partner, the child gets put down and the partner gets pampered instead. So this would be how object constancy issues could be passed down through generations as well. So people who are driven by guilt typically also have object constancy issues, and to manage theirs, they might dedicate their lives to being that constant good parent figure that they didn't get to others. So in effect, by being a loyal, dedicated, and attuned partner, they work to heal their partner's object constancy issues, not their own. So they're giving to the other what they needed themselves, and by doing this, they get to get a reprieve from the critical voice in the head that's telling them that they're just not good enough to be wanted, which was what they probably believed in the first place when they were developing. So this puts the guilty person in a sort of codependent bind in which their emotional security is tied into how secure their partner is feeling, which means as long as their partner feels secure, so do they. So it's the old yeah, so it's the old you're okay, I'm okay situation. So guilt-driven people then therefore are in effect drawn to people who also have object constancy issues because they need to be with someone who needs fixing. So someone who is a secure personality style isn't going to have the issues for the guilty person to meet, which means the guilty person is going to feel redundant, and they're in that redundancy they'll probably start feeling their feelings from childhood coming into their system, so they need to be helping people. So, but because the guilty person attaches to someone with object constancy issues, this means that that person might have to sabotage that relationship when they've been looked after good enough for too long. So the guilty person is then going to have to up their game to manage, manage both theirs and their partner's security in that you're okay, I'm okay situation, because the partner they're attached to probably isn't going to be able to stay okay for long. So fear-driven people might also act in similar ways to those who are driven by guilt because their focus in relationships is probably going to be around ensuring that the other person feels emotionally safe or physically safe, that no physical harm is going to come to them. So if that person feels safe, then they feel safe, and the environment has a measure of consistency then. So it's that similar thing that it's if you're okay, I'm okay. So people with a lot of shame in their process might be powerfully drawn to people who will attempt to meet their object constancy needs because it's the thing that they yearn for most. It's that validation that they're valuable. But their lack of object constancy means that anyone who gets anywhere close to meeting those needs is going to need to be pushed away as the consistency triggers their massive, deeply buried terror of abandonment. So the shame also helps them to manage their fear of consistency, because if they can continue to believe that they're not good enough for someone to love or stay with, then they have a real reason to distrust their partner. And this is going to validate their desire to sabotage their relationships. So in the shames person narrative, the belief would be something like, because I'm not okay, you aren't going to want to be with me. So I'm going to get rid of you first. So it's not quite the same as, well, it's nothing like the same as you're okay, I'm okay. So there's often a double bind for people with poor object constancy, as part of them truly yearns for the connection that they never had, while another part of them is terrified of getting it, because largely unconsciously, their process remembers the terrible emotional pain that came as a result of them trying to trust and connect to people in their early years. And it's this double bind that invites them to sabotage relationships or team up with partners that will sabotage it for them. So this is simply because healthy relationships are not something that they know how to deal with. They didn't learn to live in that environment when they were little, so they don't know how to handle it now. So instead, they're drawn to what's familiar, as a tough, familiar environment can be far less scary than staying in a healthy, unknown one, because there's a terrifying fear of abandonment lurking in the peaceful waters of those healthy relationships, which to them is something far more scary than anything that a current partner can throw at them. So putting up with a controlling or abusive partner will probably feel preferable to risking tapping into those feelings that they felt when they were tiny and terrified. So in effect, our brain makes the decision that it's safer to be suspicious and not attach than to attach and be abandoned once again. So really what's happening is they are spending their lives trying to avoid something that's already happened to them, something that the memories of have been long buried, and their psychological process just doesn't want anything like consistency and intimacy digging up that old stuff again. So because they're caught in this old subconscious loop of believing that someone is going to make them feel like that again, they aren't able to think rationally about the fact that as adults, there are more options available to help them if they get hurt. Because as adults, we can go to therapy, we can talk to friends, we can get meds from the doctor that will help that will ease our depression. So these are all the things that wouldn't have been an option when you were little, and the only people who could help you are the ones that are causing the object constancy issues. So if we get left by our partners or they pass away as adults, there's no doubt how much that's going to hurt. Of course, it's going to be painful, but that emotional pain cannot be compared to how it must feel for a child to feel abandoned or not loved or wanted, because that is going to be intolerable. That's going to be something off the Richter scale. Because to a child's developing brain, not being wanted means that they can die. it's I guess it's in our biology. If people don't come and feed us, our brain is going to go is going to feel that way. It's going to feel that we're going to starve to death, which means that their fear of abandonment has elements of a primal fear within it. And this primal fear is the main reason why people with object constancy issues don't want to risk being abandoned again, because to them abandonment might mean death at an unconscious level, and death's a pretty big deterrent. So they'd rather risk or not being in a relationship and be lonely or be caught up in a drama than attach and feel that primal fear that once was theirs. So I hope that you found this interesting and useful. And if there are any areas of this you want me to discuss in a little more detail, just pop a message in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll pop another one up shortly. Take care. Okay, goodbye.